Buenas tardes. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today, Disasters in Puerto Rico and the Impact of the Diaspora. Today, we have a great lineup. Two of our best researchers, Carlos Vargas and Jennifer Hinojosa, will be presenting their work. Jennifer will be talking about enduring disasters, Puerto Rico 3 years after Maria. That report was just uploaded today. You can download it. Carlos is going to be talking about a report that he did with Charles Venator about Holyoke. Holyoke is one case study of how displacement and migration play out in the age of climate change. Those presentations will be followed by some commentary from Dr. Fernando Rivera, who's a professor in the University of Central Florida in Orlando, and he's also the director of the Puerto Rico Research Hub at the University of Central Florida.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here in this webinar. I want to take the opportunity first, maybe some of you are not familiar with the Puerto Rico Research Hub at the University of Central Florida, and basically our purpose is to investigate, disseminate knowledge, and provide creative solutions to pressing needs affecting the Puerto Rican community, its diaspora, and surrounding communities. And you can find more information there on the website listed. Four of the main things that we do is academic research. We provide opportunities for students to do research. We also do these outreach opportunities. So what we learn, we want to share with the community, not only the academic community, but also the community at large. And we're big on partnerships. And this is an example of the great partnership that the Puerto Rico Research Hub has with El Centro. So getting into the reports and the findings that we discussed today, and I wanted to take the chance to compare some of the things that happen in Holyoke and compare it to Florida, and some main topics out here in terms of some of the things that were going on. So if you look closely at the report in terms of the response to the storm, and basically when the storm did happen, what was the response? Basically in Puerto Rico, before families actually moved to the continental United States. As you can see, it seems that government was relatively absent, and it was a realization that a lot of people had to depend on each other. And we have a study that Ariana Valle did on families that came here to Central Florida. You see some of the similarities in terms of the experience of the response. So you see some similar patterns out here. When we look at the reasons for moving and the ones that Carlos showed out there or are in the report, it tells you obviously in the Holyoke case that there was a lot of mass destruction, that people didn't have much choice. But if we see some of the studies from Florida International University and the study that Gamarra did after in the summer of 2018, it shows that financial opportunities were high on that, and some reflect some of the similarities as well with the report. One of the things also in looking at the report and the recommendations, right? Sort of this one-stop shop place where people could actually consolidate all the resources that were available in the community. In the case of Holyoke, you had Enlace de Familias, kind of like became that center out here. Here in Central Florida, we had sort of a multiple agency resource center at the airport that provided sort of all the resources right there at the airport where people could take advantage of those. It ran from somewhere to October to December. The majority of the cases were in October when we had that large influx of people coming in. One of the big differences out here, this is a community in Holyoke. You have a community center that is established, continues on. The issue that we have here in Florida is that that center was eventually dissolved, and basically the responsibility for the follow-up, all those sort of things landed on those nonprofit organizations, some governmental agencies out here. But again, sort of some similarities in terms of that. One of the big issues also in terms of the report on Holyoke is the issue of climate migration, right? That right now we have kind of like this idea that it's only Puerto Rico, but that eventually we see sort of the impact of climate change and different scenarios that we have right now. We have the fires in California, we've seen floods, we've seen the hurricanes, all those type of things. And that's given me and giving the academic community another avenue to do research upon. So I want to share quickly with the audience some of the research that we're doing. And so we're part of a team of scholars that we're looking at climate migrant receiving communities in the Gulf area. And this is part of the National Academy of Sciences Gulf Research Program. And we're collaborating out here. But we're looking at comparing out here. And the point is that it's not only Puerto Rico that is going through this, that is impacting the diaspora, but we've seen that internally as well. So looking at what happened in Hurricane Katrina and how Houston responded to it, what's happening in Louisiana right now in terms of sub-communities dealing with climate change, and obviously in the Orlando site, the site we're responsible for, how did their community in Orlando responded to that as well. And we're doing it through 5 main areas, basically looking at housing markets, we're looking at financial services that include literacy and debt counseling, employment and economic development opportunities, healthcare provided capacity, and social, cultural, and recreational activities. So we are underway with that study, and we'll look forward to share those results in the future. Looking at the other report and the other presentation, Disasters in Puerto Rico and the Impact on the Diaspora. It's been 3 years after Hurricane Maria, and now we have a little bit of information. I was fortunate enough to serve as guest editor for a special edition of Population and Environment, which you can see on your screen, and I recommend that you actually access that because it has a lot of information. But in this, it gave us sort of a chance to see what were those population changes, what are some of the techniques that we can use in terms of that. There was a lot of confusion at the beginning. Do we use just census? Do we use airport transportation data? Do we use school records? So now we see a little bit of clarity out here in terms of those. So we have a wonderful collection of scholars that are paying attention to those issues. I'm providing some of the things. Still 3 years out, there's still things that we are just beginning to understand out here. And I think the work that Centro doing is important in providing some answers to those questions that we still have. We had kind of like this issue of cascading disasters, right? Not only Hurricane Maria, but we also, at the beginning of this year, we had the earthquakes. And also, we're dealing with the pandemic, we're dealing with COVID-19 right now. So what is going to be sort of the impact of that as well in terms of that? What has been the impact on the diaspora in terms of that? Ironically enough, the response to Hurricane Maria, the response to the earthquakes has all of a sudden become a spotlight in our presidential campaign out here. So we have both candidates putting together platforms of how to address these issues out here. So basically a big impact here locally on the continental United States in terms of looking what is the impact of, 3 years after Maria, we're still talking about these issues. Recently, with these numbers out here, and you can see we have seen, especially in the Central Florida area, that a lot of Puerto Ricans did actually return. So kind of like this idea that, how are we going to deal with this temporal kind of like movements and permanent type of movements, whether they're going to remain in one place on another is going to be an issue that we need to study. And, kind of like this issue of climate migration is going to continue to happen, right? In terms of, the displacement of people continue to happen, and Puerto Ricans are part of that equation as well. Obviously, COVID-19 is going to have a profound impact as well. And we know so far that it has affected Puerto Ricans in areas that we have high concentration. So places like New York, New Jersey, Florida. And basically, how have we still, we've seen that it has impacted, issues such as employment, housing, healthcare, and insurance. So those are issues that we continue to look at in the future. I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you what's going to happen, but from the evidence that we have, we are 3 years and we're still talking about reconstruction. We're talking about dispensing funds. We're still talking about these issues. So we knew from the beginning this was going to be a long process, and it's going to continue to be a long process out here in terms of that. But some of the lessons that we learned is that community groups, nonprofit groups, have been the ones that have taken the lead in responding to this, right? Both in Puerto Rico and both here in the diaspora. So it's time to recognize, how do we give them the resources out here to make sure that they're successful? I think one of the good things about all this spotlight that Puerto Rico has is that it's going to provide us with some type of accountability as well. I think it's time to make our decision makers accountable for their decisions in terms of all the disaster, in terms of the recovery, in terms of the things that are working and the things that are not working. Obviously, that depends on us and on Puerto Ricans exercising our potential political power. We have a great opportunity to make a difference, but we have to make sure not only to register to vote, but to go out there and exercise our right to vote. And finally, we need to remain vigilant to emergency situations. If 2020 has provided us with any indication of what the future is going to look like, we can not only concentrate on hurricanes. And sort of the case of Puerto Rico has shown us that it's hurricanes, it's droughts, it's earthquakes, it's COVID-19. The same here, same thing here, stateside, right? It seems that, depending on the time of the day, we have this shift in temperatures, we have floods, we have sea level rise, we have hurricanes, we have tornadoes, we have a lot of things going on. So we need to remain vigilant out there. But I think this is a great opportunity for both the community in the diaspora and the community in Puerto Rico to come together. And there's no alternative. We'll continue to work hard to make sure that Puerto Rico continues its path to a full recovery.
So thank you, Fernando. Very interesting presentation. There were a couple of questions that surfaced while you were speaking. One of them is related to the return migration. So in your estimation, what is the balance of the population? We know from the data from 2019 that it was a washout, that there were that return migration to Central Florida and other parts of Florida kind of was equivalent to the people that left. So there's a huge return migration. And, can you expand on that? And then what were the factors in your estimation? Some people asked whether racism played a role. Other people were referring to what you just spoke about, the housing and the whole question of jobs, right? And what's going. So if you can answer that, then we can move to Sandra.
Yeah, no, so similar to the numbers that Jennifer was providing us, there was a stabilization out here. And we have to understand that a lot of the sort of population movement for Puerto Ricans is looking for economic opportunities, right? Here, like in Holyoke, right, in terms of affordable housing, living wages, we're dealing with those things prior to Hurricane Maria. So it's really difficult for some families out here. And we still have some cases, some reports that still families are living in these weekly motels out there where electricity is being cut off, the FEMA help ran out. So basically, it's still an indication that that there's a realization that it's not might be as easy as we said, kind of like moving to the Orlando area out here, because there's still some issues that the community has to face out here. And I'm guessing that this is going to be sort of accelerated a little bit more with COVID-19, with the effect it's having on the hospitality industry as well. And it's not necessarily that it's going to mean that a lot of Puerto Ricans are going to go back to the island, but they might go to other places, right? And that might be some of the issues that might be going on as well, some internal movement as well. So you'll see other areas like, we saw the numbers before, there might be an increase in Texas and other areas where there might be some more economic opportunities out here. I think there was a question, Sandra, you're still there, Sandra Stern, about whether there's a Puerto Rico Climate Migration Policy Consortium, I'm not aware if there's one. I'm not aware of, but anybody can tell me in the panelists out here. Edwin, you asked me about climate change organizations. There's a lot of organizations dealing with these issues. In Puerto Rico, if you don't know, you can follow the work of Marisa Barreto at the University of Puerto Rico at the Planning School that is looking at sea level rise and coastal erosion. Conciencia Puerto Rico is another group that is looking at kind of like these issues of climate health. So that's it. That is happening in Puerto Rico. For my part, I'm affiliated more on the disaster side of it. The Research Hub is part of the North American Alliance of Hazards and Disaster Institutes. I'm going to do a presentation later on with the National Adaptation Forum at the University of Central Florida. We have also an urban resiliency initiative. The city of Orlando does have a resiliency office that looks at sustainability, climate change, and all sort of things. And that's becoming more common in some cities, basically to have resiliency office looking at these issues of climate change. Edwin, you also asked me about the elderly and health services. I have briefly touched upon some of that research, but we know, I mean, if we look at the demographics in Puerto Rico, we have a percentage of elderly population that needs help out there. I mean, in terms of research, in terms of health services, I'm not aware of, concrete specific studies that have looked at that, but I'm always wondering, in terms of the transnational sort of, if we can call it type of services, right? And we've heard a lot of anecdotal sort of stories that people come here for 6 months and then they go back to their doctors and they get the treatment that they like and they go back and forward in terms of that. That's something that I'm proposing to do in the future. So again, I'll keep you posted if we are able to get funding to do that type of research. So I think those were the questions that were for me. So Sandra,
and the Centro newsletter will be happy to disseminate this as you produce that, right? So Sandra, it's your turn. I have more questions for all of you. I mean, a few more, but let Sandra take a crack at this.
Okay, before.
So real quick, so Carlos, like Carlos mentioned, we saw some of that cross collaboration here in Florida as well. I think the realization that it's becoming a political power, people want to be part of that community and response in times of need. I think my issue is the issue of sustainability, right? And now we have other groups as well. We have a lot of Venezuelans coming in. We have a lot of Colombians and other groups. How can we integrate those? And for some reason, it seems that at least the press coverage is sort of kind of like dividing the issues, but I think we can find those common issues out here and sort of establish that cross collaboration. So thank you, everybody.